and welcome back to this series. In this video, we are going to be looking at some other built-in methods that are in Python we can use on the numerical data types. So in our previous video, we created these three variables that are made up of an integer, a float, and a complex number. So I'm going to make reference to some methods that can be used on these different data types. So for this float, so I'm going to skip the int value because we have basically used all the methods that are available for the int data type. So we are going to be working with this float value, and I am going to set it to a negative float value number. So I am going to declare another print statement, and I'm going to call this and open my parentheses, and I'm going to call this ABS method on that float. So I'm going to call it float value. So remember that the variable name is float value. So we already encountered this when we were working with the math module, when we used something like FABS. So like math dots. So this FABS and ABS, they do the same thing. So what it will do for you is to give you the absolute value of that particular number, right? So it is going to give you an absolute value of that particular number. So I'm going to save and run. So this we have 5.5. So if I add positive to that number again and print again, I am going to still have the same number. So that's fabs and abs, they do the same thing. So I'm going to comment out the other print statement. So right now I'm going to create another float value, and this time around I'm going to just copy this and make reference to it again. So float value 2, and this time around, after my decimal, I'm just going to pass in 0. So another method we are going to use is that instead of this, I'm going to clear this print statement, and I'm going to make reference to that float value, and I'm going to call the dot is integer. So, and I'm going to close it. So now this is supposed to return a boolean value, and what it's checking is, does this float, the value of this float value now, that is 5.5, after the decimal point, is there any value there, or is just 0? So I'm going to save and run. So this one says false. So it says false because it is not an integer, right? So it's not an integer, it has a decimal value. So now I'm going to make reference to the second one. So we have the second variable is float value 2. So, and I'm going to run it, and this time around it says true. So you have 5.0. So this is equivalent to just 5. So you can call it a float, and you can also reference it as an integer. And that is it for the float data type. So the next one is that we are going to move on to the complex data type. So remember that the complex data type, we saved it with the variable complex value. So now I'm going to call this method dot image. So this is going to give us the imaginary number. So now I made mention of the number that has j attached to it being referred to as the imaginary number. So if you want to get the imaginary number in that float value, you just call this dot image on it, and if you want to get the real value, you get the real method on it. So the real value is the 5. Now another method we can call is dot conjugate. So, and what does this do? What it does is that it will give you the inverse of this value. So here we have 5 plus 2j, so it's going to give us 5 minus 2j. So I'm going to save this and run. So now we have 5 minus 2j. So if for any reason in your program you are going to be accessing a complex number, and you want to invert it from what it actually is to the inverse of that particular value, you can use the dot conjugate method. You can use the dot conjugate method on it. So that is it for this section, and I'm going to meet you in the Boolean section. Thank you.